Devil Wears Prada film has been one of my favourite films for 20 years, and I'd never read the book until this year. So that is what I'm getting into today. A little bit of light reading. Is it light reading? The Devil Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger, or Weisberger, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, 2003. Obviously, there was the film, right, the original film in 2006, and then The Devil Wears Prada 2, which was released on 1st of May 2026. Have you been to see the film? Put it down in the comments, please, if you have been to see the films. If you've been to see both films, which one do you think was better? If you've also read the book, which one do you think is better? The book or film one? Obviously, the book compares to film one. So if you've read the book and watched film one, let me know which you think is better. If you've watched both films, let me know which films you think is better. So here's the thing. I've been a fan of this film for a long time for various reasons. You know, I love a little bit of the fashion. I like the fact that it was kind of, as it was described, you know, inspired by this true story. I remember when it came out, people were like, oh my gosh, like, is it about Anna Wintour? Is it not? Etc. All of that stuff. So it was just really interesting, shot really well. Like Anne Hathaway as an actor as well. I like a lot of the actors in it. I mean, Meryl Streep, incredible, Stanley Tucci, all of that, right? So many reasons to love that first film. And I have watched that first film so many times, I can repeat a lot of the lines from it, right? So love that film, absolutely love that film. So then when they were making A Devil Wears Prada 2, incredible. In fact, I was convinced that I was going to go and watch it twice, but I just haven't had the time to go and do it. So obviously I'm now just waiting for it to come out on TV. So when the sequel came out, went to watch it, absolutely loved it. And the thing is, the sequel basically then sent me down a rabbit hole. The sequel, and I don't know whether it's because, you know, I heard a few people sort of saying, oh, we don't think the sequel's as good as the first one, this, that and the other. And it sent me down this rabbit hole of, I wonder how much of the film was real. That's what the sequel sent me down. And watching YouTube, as I do, I watch a lot of YouTube. I probably watch more YouTube than anything, more YouTube than Netflix, etc. So I stumbled upon a couple of interviews. There's a channel called The Run Through with Vogue. So it's an official Vogue channel. And there are a couple of interviews on there with an individual called Chloe Malle, one of the editors, and she does a couple of interviews. The first one that she does is with 3 of Anna Wintour's former assistants, and it is all around, you know, how realistic is The Devil Wears Prada. And all of these interviews, these are fairly recent, right? These are all within like a few weeks of the film being released, or there may have even been before, I can't remember. So she's got 3 of Anna Wintour's former assistants, and they're talking through, you know, how much of what we see in the film is kind of like based on real life, etc. And then, so that was the first video that I watched. Then there was another video with an individual called Leslie Fremar, I'm going to say it's pronounced, or Leslie Fremar, who apparently is the real Emily, as in, you know, like Emily Blunt's character, Emily. She's the real one, apparently. Well, I say apparently. She says that she is, because the reason that she says she is obviously, if you've watched the film, you know that Miranda Priestley, aka Anna Wintour, has 2 assistants. I think one of them said that Anna may even have 3 assistants, or at one time have had 3 assistants. Anyway, typically has 2 assistants, the first assistant and the second assistant. And what I loved about the videos is they go into the tasks of the first and second assistant. These are the real assistants, right? They go into the tasks that they do. And to me, it just completely mirrors what you see in the film. So anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole. So Leslie Fremar, now that's being interviewed by Chloe Malle, basically she says, I'm pretty certain, well, she knows it was, she's like, I'm pretty certain it was me because I was the first assistant when Lauren Weisberger, the author of The Devil Wears Prada, was the second assistant. And, you know, and she wasn't really feeling the job. And there was a lot of other things, you know, she sort of said, Leslie said that the saying "a million girls would kill for this job" is something she used to say all the time, right? Leslie said so. Obviously, and the interview, or both interviews that Chloe Malle does for the run through Vogue, very very light-hearted. If I can remember to link them below, I will definitely do that, because I would absolutely say check them out if you're a fan. But I tell you what, it was, when I watched it, and then I thought, this is so interesting. But to me, I could just see little snippets of where I thought, there's probably more truth in the film and the book than they're letting on. There was just something about the body language, and I thought, I've got to read this book. I've got to go and read the book. So after I've now watched both films, I've watched these interviews, I went and got the book. In fact, so I got it on an audiobook, right? Because I'm a busy person. So I got it on an audiobook. Really well narrated, actually. Not by the author, but really well narrated. And I absolutely devoured the audiobook, and I loved it. I did a lot of laughing. It's just really good. It is a little bit darker, and that's something that a lot of people say. It is a little bit darker than the book. What's really interesting, actually, if you watch the video with the interview with Leslie Fremar, the real Emily, what she says apparently is when they got the first heads up about the book, and she was called into Anna Wintour's office, and they'd had almost like a I can't remember what the term that was used, but almost like a preview that this book was coming, which I guess was probably based on things like the proposal and this, that and the other. She said it was even darker and was potentially actually quite cruel. But in between them seeing that and the final edit coming out, the final book obviously was then a lot lighter. There's more humour in it. And then obviously when the film then came out, the film version was even lighter, right? So that's what's really, really interesting. So I just devoured the book. I really wanted to try to understand how much of what we were seeing in the film was true. Now, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because I don't want to get sued by anybody, right? So I'm not going to say what I think. But if you have a view, just put it down in the comments, because it's really interesting, when you watch the interview, specifically with the three assistants, when they're talking about how much of it was truth. You only need to obviously listen to what they say. Some of it they say absolutely yes. We would sometimes have to run and get people and sort of chase, I don't want to say chase them down the corridors, but chivvy them along is a term that we use in the UK. Chivvy them along into meetings if Anna wanted to see somebody, right? So there's absolutely things that you can see and you're like, right, I can get a sense of what it was like to work in that office. And then the other thing that was really interesting that was in the book that didn't really come out in the film, but I think there were snippets of it in these interviews. In the book, Lauren talks about that the protagonist would basically say that whenever somebody was criticising Miranda Priestley, right, they would almost stop themselves just in case there were either cameras hidden that they weren't aware of, or maybe they felt that, Miranda Priestley might be listening, or they maybe felt that, the person that they were telling, that they were complaining about Miranda to, might take it back to Miranda, right? So that which was really interesting. And I thought, can we see hints of that, in the interviews? And then also what's interesting, and I think linked to that point, and linked to, there's a thread through the first film of almost like Miranda sort of saying, this job's never going to be taken away from me because I know too many people in the industry, and there are all of these designers and etc. that have said that wherever I go, it's towards the end of the book, right? Well, what's really interesting, apparently, in terms of the first film, there is a lot of talk about the fact that for the first film, it was quite difficult for producers, wardrobe stylists, etc., to actually get people to work on the film, to actually get brands to give them clothes and things like that, because they didn't want the wrath. This is the rumor, right? Don't sue me, anybody, because they didn't want the wrath of the fallout of being associated with that project. When it came to the second film, and Anna Wintour had given her blessing and was almost like playing up to it, and actually was being quite a good sport about it, everybody wanted to be involved. And if you have watched the second film, there's the scene there's a scene where there's a party and there's a lot of famous people, like Law Roach is in it, and like everybody and anybody wants to be clearly in this particular scene. It was not like that in the first film, and that was because people were worried about the fallout from it, which actually does reinforce some of the, you know, the allegations in the first book, basically. So interesting. So I think if you're interested to understand how much of it was really true and actually how bad was it potentially, allegedly, based on Lauren Weisberger's book, then I would absolutely read that book. And obviously it's also way more detailed as well. I mean, the other thing I think as well, in terms of like corporate culture, even though it's, you know, it's fashion, so it's not your typical corporate necessarily, but in terms of like company culture, what's interesting in the second film, if you've seen the second film, is Miranda's new assistant, you know, calls her out when she does like crazy things like, you know, throwing a coat on the desk and all of that sort of thing. It's like, no, you're not allowed to do that kind of thing. And I do think that some of that is probably quite true to today. I think a lot of those sorts of behaviors that like bosses used to get away with in like the 80s, you can't really do those things nowadays. There's probably a few old dinosaurs that are still doing that sort of thing, but in the main you really can't. And actually often it is the Gen Zers that are calling out some of this like crazy behavior, which is again I think really interesting. So that's it really. What I'm going to do whenever I do one of these books where I'm going to dive into, so this for me is a perfect like holiday read, or you know, if you're into diving, if you want to like really analyze like leadership behaviors, maybe, you know, you could kind of like tenuously link it to that. And what I'm going to do at the end of these videos, I'm going to do a little bit of like a quick fire verdict review of the book. So rating out of 5, what would I give it from like if I was rating it on Amazon? I'd probably give it 4 out of 5. It is a little bit hard going. I think the ending of the book probably goes on for longer than it needs to. Maybe that's just my view. My one-line verdict: it's a must-read. If you're a fan of the films, you have to read the book. Who should read it? Anybody that loves the film and anybody that wants to know what was real, because I think you get a really good take. Who shouldn't read it? Who is this book not for? I think if you're not into fashion, then you probably just think the whole thing's really frivolous anyway. Audiobook, physical book, or both? I mean, I listen to it by audiobook. Would I listen to it by physical book? This is something I'm going to get into, because I think that maybe years and years of listening to audiobooks has affected my brain. And I'm going to get into this in another video, because one of my favorite stories, my favorite story books that I read many years ago on holiday, I tried to read it a couple of years ago, and I just couldn't pick it up. It's one of the, you know, sometimes you find a book where when you pick it up, you can't put it down. Well, what happened this time is when I put it down, I couldn't pick it up. So, yeah, with this one, I would say audiobook, but that might be just me. You know, for some people, the physical book might work. Anyway, have you ever worked for somebody like a Miranda Priestett? I used to have a boss. I totally forgot that. I always forget. I used to have a boss that we used to call Miranda. That's for another video. Have you ever worked for somebody who people couldn't criticize out loud, you know, who everybody thought was a little bit of a nightmare, but maybe you were scared to say? Don't put their name in the comments, basically. By the way, I don't want to be sued. But that's it. That is my take. Let me know yours. Ciao.